This day was inevitable. Down by the river, getting the ENTJs to tell me about the rabbits. Just a sad state of affairs. The best of times, the worst of times. I've gotten probably 8 hours of sleep in the last 3 days, and I showered early. I realized it's been 4 years since this channel moved into typology. I was going to have a quiet, tearful little relapse and drift off into sleep. But although the sun was setting, the dreadful moon of reality was rising. You finally went and did it. You found the thing that's going to turn you off ENTJs. You knew this was coming. But aw shit, here we go again. Gotta make the video right now. So before we get into ENTJ details, what am I talking about? You can look at each type as a sweater or some other article of clothing. You really enjoy them as a gestalt unit, but you see lots of little threads hanging off them. And in an attempt to understand them better, you pull at them. And with each thread you pull, your understanding of this type deepens, but you unravel your vision of them a little more. And you can pull hundreds of threads without unraveling that vision of a type. But if you pull that one right thread, or maybe wrong thread, the whole thing comes apart and you can't put it back together. That's what happened to me with INFJs. Now that happened relatively quickly. I still do like INFJs, but what I learned can't be unlearned. Forbidden knowledge. What I learned, or the thread I pulled about INFJs, is the fact you as an individual are never really going to know them. They won't give you their true selves, not that they're obligated to. They don't know how to give you their true selves, or they know how but they're too anxious to. You have to learn their true selves by parallax, by measuring, comparing, and contrasting their behavior with different people or different groups of people in different contexts. Find what lines up. You have to be a detective to know this person. And even if you do all that, you are still no closer to knowing them really. And unlike with every other type I have studied, I'm not learning anything from them directly. I am learning things, but I'm learning from picking at things around them, which I don't really need to be close to them for, or even necessarily studying them intensively for, which is why I don't really make INFJ MBTI videos anymore. That was the Rubicon crossed. And I think each type has these. Like you're playing let's say you're playing a Metal Gear game, and you get close to the end, and there's a twist that recontextualizes everything. Doesn't necessarily break everything, but you can't go back to the way things were. And important to note here, these revelations, what makes them revelations, what makes them points of no return, is the fact they are not unique to individuals. These are major trends that sequence other behavioral trends among all individuals of this type. Imagine if you learned everyone born in Argentina was a vampire. It's not going to change everything about your life, but once you know it, there's no going back from that. And with ENTJs, I knew this was going to happen eventually, but I have been surprised for the longest time it hasn't happened yet. ENTJs have threatened my life. ENTJs have been marriage candidates. I've been dealing with a shitty ENTJ pretty closely for a year, and I deal with shitty ENTJs regularly in my sector. None of these things have changed necessarily the way I look at ENTJs, basically. But it finally hit me, like I was shot with a silver bullet. One question you can ask any ENTJ that will always be relevant and will always, if you have it in your mind, taint your view of them. You really like thinking that about yourself, don't you? Reviewing my records, I haven't met one ENTJ who has held some extreme view of themselves, a persona, that is important to them and they'll try to convince themselves of too, probably without realizing it, that is totally divorced from reality. Essentially, their identities are built on sand. And we've been somewhat aware of this for a long while now. We discussed that little candle in the fortress. But it's not just one important aspect of themselves hidden away and defended. It is one crucial, critical aspect of themselves they need constantly to convince themselves and others of to function at all. Oh no. How are you going to handle it when you realize you aren't who you say you are? How haven't you figured this out yet? Or why aren't you defending it better? You speak your Achilles heel at least once every conversation. And that's a dangerous vulnerability, because as resilient as ENTJs are, emotionally they are not resilient. You're a three-legged table with one of your legs termite ridden. And it took my stupid ass this long to realize that, but there are people out there who recognize it instantly, that you are critically vulnerable and don't realize it. That you're able to function only because your ego exists within a nest of illusions you have created for yourself. Right? Most people go out into society and have to deal with the externally imposed social illusions. ENTJs build their own illusions and they need them. They're really weird or aggressive about them if you feel around them or probe them, but they fall apart if you kick that leg out from under them. If you blow their nest of illusions away in a way they can't compensate for. And now that I have put that together in that way, I don't think I'm going to be able to look at ENTJs the same. Now, I'm sure there are some exceptions, and I hope there are, but the fact the primary vulnerability to your operating is an emotional one that you reveal constantly, need to convince other people of, or that you aren't, or that you are, and that it's based in self-deception you don't want to get out of, it's enough to gross out your shadow. Now, I'm sure I'll still research ENTJs, because I do still pull value out of them, but it's going to be hard to look at them the same way now. I'm going to need to find a new way to look at them. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.